Okay, I'm still alive. I survived the flu. Last weekend I did not do any videos because I went out with some of my other family members that ended up with that batch of flu. We went out to eat and I ended up with food poisoning. So I ended up spending most of the last weekend in the bathroom, which was not a experience I want to try again anytime soon. So, since it's been a couple weeks since the last video, I gotta do a good one. Now, as you see in the picture here, I'm showing you some pine trees. These are just some of the pine trees that are on my property. For those of you that thought I was lying when I said I'm in the Great White North, well, this should show you that's exactly where I live, the Great White North. We've gotten a considerable amount of snowfall this year. This week I went through and I did a project that I've been wanting to do for a couple years, and now I'm going to do the video on it. As you can see, I got a little trench I dug here to get over to what I was working on. And this is what I worked on. A shelter inside a pine tree. Now, I know I've mentioned this a few times about a TV show back in the 90s called World of Valor, where they did episodes of different Special Forces units from around the world. One of the episodes they did was on the Norwegian Special Forces known as the Jaegers. Translated, it means hunter. In the episode, they make a shelter in a pine tree, which is a common thing that they do to conceal themselves from enemy observation and also to keep them alive in winter. I tried copying it. This is the first time I've ever done this. And I did make some mistakes, and I'll point those out. But as you see here, this wall over here was a big open space. Now, we filled that in using branches cut from other pine trees. Now, first thing we did is we cleared the branches to about 2 to 3 feet up off the ground. My recommendation, go to 3 feet. Make sure you clear enough branches that you're going to be able to sit up in there easily without brushing your head on the branches. We did not go that high. Some of the branches we left at the 2 foot, and that was a mistake. And I'm saying we because I and my combat cameraman used this last night. We slept out here to see how well it worked. And every time we got up, we would sit up. Our head would hit those branches up there and knock off the little twigs, which, if you can see the ground here, are all over the place. They kept landing inside our sleeping bags, landing down our shirts, and it made it kind of uncomfortable on that part. We were constantly pulling those out whenever we had to get up there in the night. So make sure you clear a space up about 3 feet on the tree. Now, the dead branches that you take off, what we did, if I could show you, we used it to make kind of a support network in here of them. We interwove them as best we could, the dead branches that had no needles on them. Then we went and cut some fresh pine boughs, layered them over the outside of these dead ones. Now, one thing we needed to do, we decided these little branches like this that stick down, snap those off. before you occupy it as a shelter. That helps too, keeping those from falling down on you during the night. And then clear out as much of the snow as you can. Now we did this using light basic survival gear. We used US modular sleeping bags and sleeping mats. We put the sleeping mats down on the ground, our sleeping bags on the top. We did this as a survival scenario, so we got as close as we could. As you can probably see there, there's one, we laid one mat there, one mat here. Now, doing it that way, we could easily fit 4 people inside this shelter. If you're doing this in a combat situation, this size shelter, which is probably about 8 foot across from the outside edge to outside edge, you can probably fit 2 people in here with their gear to include rucksacks. But in a survival situation, you're trying to stay alive in winter, you could pack people closer together to help conserve some body heat in that. We would be able to fit 4 easily. Now, we brought out some tools with us and had them with us over the night in case the snow got heavy. It did snow last night. We only got a couple inches. They were talking about possibly up to 5 inches. We ended up on the lower end. We ended up with only a couple. But we had with us out here in the shelter one hatchet, which we hung from a branch up on the tree so it would be up and out of the snow that we could grab it. And we kept a scoop shovel, an aluminum scoop shovel out here with us in case we had to dig our way out. Now, another mistake that we made last night, or an idea for an improvement, we needed to add more pine boughs. We did not put enough in there. And if you can tell, there's a lot of empty space up there. And when it started snowing last night, the branches stopped the lighter snow, but some of the bigger pieces, the little ice chunks, were falling through and nailing our sleeping bags and falling on our faces, so we ended up having to pull the Gore-Tex covers up over our head and leaving that small little air hole that we could breathe out of our sleeping bags so that they didn't get too damp from the moisture from our breath. So we needed to add more pine boughs. We needed to make a more of a thicker layer over the top. That was a mistake. That's a correction we're going to make. Another idea that we came up with is taking maybe a couple shelter halves, and we will put them over the sides, around each side, going around the outside here, and we will tie that to the tree using 550 cord. Now, how we're going to tie it, we're going to go tie the shelter half itself to some of the branches using the eyelets on it, and then we will take 550 cord, run it from a branch up here, and then go down and tie it near the edge there by the snow. So we'll have a vertical line of 550 cord going like this right up against the branches to hold the shelter half in place. By doing it that way, that should help with making it more waterproof and keeping some of the wind out and also more of the snow. This is a basic pine tree shelter. We are going to do this experiment one more time here because there's still plenty of time left in winter. We'll do the improvements on this shelter and then do another video telling you how well it worked out. As you can see, there's still a lot of gaps as we pan around here. We thought we had filled in all the worst of them, but as you see, there's some that kind of opened up. They're not that noticeable with the naked eye, but during the night, it became noticeable. especially when the wind picked up a little bit and started blowing some snow through. But how long this took us to do? I'll say at least an hour. Now, when you get the pine boughs for doing the camouflage on this, I'll pull you back out. When you get the pine boughs, okay, cut them from multiple trees. Don't get them from just one. You want to spread it out so that if anyone moves through the area, they may not notice. So if an enemy patrol's moving through, they come through the area that you've gotten pine boughs from, they may not notice, one or two trees with one or two branches cut off. But if you went through and you cut a whole bunch of them, made a big blank spot in it, they're going to notice it. They're going to take note and they're going to check that area. Now, see if I can show you here. You can see some of them. We stood straight up and down, angled it a little bit towards the ground to make kind of our wall. And then we stacked additional ones over the top. We layered it from bottom up. Now, one thing that was in that episode with the Norwegian Jaegers, the guy also got some smaller branches that were, say, a maximum of a foot in length. So basically, like this much of it, snapped them off, and then brought them over, and he was feeding them in to make it look more natural. Because right now, when you're standing farther away, you don't notice it. You get closer, you can see all of these are angled downward. So it doesn't look normal, unless it would be covered in snow. But by getting these small pieces, you can feed them in to make it look like they're growing out normally, to increase your camouflage. And you can see there some of the holes that we missed, that we didn't notice. Here's a spot that worked a little bit better. There's a spot that allowed snow coming through. And you can see some other spots like in here that snow was coming through during the night when the wind picked up. So, improvements to be made. Now, after you put the branches on, I'll make this note. Go through with the snow shovel, a scoop shovel or whatever you have. Take some of the snow and sprinkle it around, fill in your footprints. Try to make it blend in as normal as possible so that hopefully no one notices it. And then when it snows again, hopefully that adds to the camouflage. So, have just a small opening. It might help if you had something to cover this up, either a pine bough or maybe a poncho or a piece of tarp or some type of material to close this off to help keep the air from blowing in. But make sure that it does not freeze to the ground, so leave a little bit of separation. So the shelter worked. We obviously lived. It did not get that cold last night. It was, I think the coldest it got was like the mid-teens, and it was supposed to get to a max of like 28 degrees, 29 degrees. It was just below 30. So we had a little bit of a temperature swing, but it still wasn't so cold we were going to freeze to death. We figured this would be the best time to do this little experiment. So, see if I can show you right up over here. There's one of our walls that was a big hole. We layered some pine boughs over it, tossed snow up against it, but as you see, we ended up with some openings that happened. And you can see the snow was kind of getting pushed in during the night. So, but you know, here's your basic shelter in a pine tree, and it worked really good. But there's improvements to be made, so expect a part 2 for this in the future. I will put a link in the description for that episode of World of Valor. Someone did post it. So go through, watch the episode. You know, maybe you can get some ideas also. Now, if you got something you want to add to this, some things that I missed, because maybe you've done this before, you know, go ahead, let me know. I'm always willing to listen to suggestions from people, as long as they're thought out and not just the type of suggestions you get from a leftist that, you know, has no intelligence involved in it. So now, for all my engineer brothers in the Patriot Militia movements, always remember, essayons, let us try.